Resident Evil, known in Japan as Biohazard, is a 2002 survival horror video game developed by Capcom. It is a remake of the 1996 video game of the same name. The game has often been referred to by developers and fans alike as remake or rebirth, to distinguish it from the original. The game was initially released as a GameCube exclusive title, fulfilling Shinji Mikami's commitment to making Studio 4 titles Nintendo exclusives. The remake was developed alongside Resident Evil 4, which became a Nintendo exclusive due to the unrelated Capcom 5 agreement, and Studio 3's Resident Evil 0, which was also intended to be a Nintendo exclusive before development was temporarily halted in 1999. While Mikami's support for exclusivity ended in 2005, the game was absent when the Capcom 5 games were ported to the more successful PlayStation 2. The remake would only receive a single port for the already backwards-compatible Nintendo Wii several years later in 2009 as part of the Resident Evil Archives collection alongside Resident Evil 0. The game begins on the night of Friday, July 24, 1998. The Special Tactics and Rescue Service, a police special forces unit consisting of ex-soldiers and scientists, has been assigned into the Arkley Mountains to investigate a series of cannibalistic homicides conducted by an unidentified group of people. Split into two teams, the Bravo team, sent out the previous night, has ceased radio contact, forcing the Alpha team to investigate their disappearance on top of completing the mission. Alpha team identifies Bravo team's derelict helicopter on the ground and investigates, finding the body of its pilot, Kevin Dooley, but no sign of the others, including its co-pilot, Edward Dewey. Soon into the search, Alpha team's Joseph Frost is attacked by a pack of mutant dogs, Cerberuses, and his body torn apart. His comrades, unable to save him, are soon forced to flee from the dogs as well. In the commotion, pilot Brad Vickers takes off, stranding the remaining 4 members of Alpha Team behind. Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and their leader Captain Albert Wesker, Ph.D., rush into a large mansion seen from afar. Soon after arriving in the mansion, the 4 Stars officers split up to search the building, though it is uncertain which actions are attributed to who. Investigating a gunshot near the dining room, Dr. Kenneth J. Sullivan of Bravo Team is found dying of a fatal throat injury. Having been murdered by a mutant cannibal zombie, Forrest Spire is found on a balcony seemingly dead, but he gets up soon after as another mutant. Richard Aiken is found poisoned from a venomous mutant snake, Yawn, and either dies of the venom or is killed by another mutant after receiving treatment. Redfield himself discovers Bravo Team's medic, Rebecca Chambers, while exploring the mansion, but she is limited mostly to the medical storerooms to offer treatment for injuries. Meanwhile, Valentine works with Burton in investigating the mansion and begins to suspect that something is wrong about him due to his movements. As time passes in the investigation, the officers become aware that the mansion is part of a base operated by Umbrella Pharmaceuticals and Umbrella USA for viral research, with the escaped mutants being the result of an escaped mutagenic virus that induced a murderous insanity due to brain damage and radical hormonal changes. In further search of the mansion, they learn of the Trevor family, George, Jessica, and Lisa, who were abducted by Umbrella Pharmaceuticals in the 1960s for use in the research of the progenitor virus by one of Umbrella's founders, Oswell E. Spencer, Earl Spencer, for whom the mansion was built. Lisa is still alive, having been kept as a human test subject for years, though she has been driven mad and horrifically mutated. With the mansion's guards dead or mutated, she is free to roam and kill as she pleases. In a nearby building used as a dormitory for laboratory workers, it is discovered to be wrecked by a giant plant, Plant 42, a mutant plant research specimen. It ran amok during the accident and attacked the staff to drain them of blood for sustenance, using its IVs. Its growth is attributed to drinking from the basement below, which houses a massive shark tank for research on fish-based mutants. In the courtyard's underground area, Bravo Team Captain Enrico Marini is discovered injured. He believes there is a traitor within Stars, responsible for their casualties, but is assassinated by a third party who quickly escapes. Moving into the laboratory, the investigation comes to a close. The nature of the virus research is finally understood to have been part of illegal bioweapons research on behalf of the United States military in disregard of the Bioweapons Convention. The latest virus, Epsilon, leaked out during an accident, leading to the staff being infected and unable to maintain the facility, which allowed the bioweapons to escape. Captain Wesker, a former U.S. Army researcher, is discovered not only to be a former member of Umbrella USA's lab team but also continued to work as a spy for the company throughout. Under orders from Umbrella, Captain Wesker brought STARS into the mansion to both prevent the alternative of state troopers being involved as well as to prove the mutants' effectiveness in killing armed professionals. Finally, he has orders to destroy the laboratory to destroy any incriminating material and recover embryonic clone samples of the BOW. Burton is revealed to have been forced to assist in the destruction of material, under threat of his family's murder. Captain Wesker is cornered on level B4 of the lab and not only confesses to the actions but also adds that he plans to betray Umbrella upon completion of the mission, destroying the lab and instead handing over the embryonic clones to a rival company. Umbrella USA's latest bioweapons creation, the T-002 Tyrant, is awoken from its slumber with orders to kill the other STARS members. However, he turns on Captain Wesker instead, and impales him with his claws before going after the others. The laboratory's self-destruct system is activated, and the 4 remaining STARS members, Burton, Chambers, Redfield, and Valentine, rush to the helipad to alert Vickers to their need for rescue. The T-002 confronts them on the helipad as the helicopter arrives, but is destroyed by a direct hit from a rocket. The STARS members fly away over the mountains as the Spencer Mansion explodes. Arkley County is a county somewhere in the Midwestern United States. The county was home of both the Arkley Mountains and Raccoon City, and was the site of a T-virus outbreak in 1998 that eventually led to the Raccoon City destruction incident. Law enforcement was provided by the Arkley County Sheriff's Department. The Arkley Mountains is a Midwestern American mountain range situated mostly or entirely within Arkley County. The Arkley Mountains are themselves part of the wider Raccoon Forest region, and until the 1998 viral outbreak was a major tourist attraction for the state. Located on the outskirts of Raccoon City, the Arkley Mountains faced heavy traffic from the notorious Umbrella Corporation, who maintained several large facilities in the region, including the Arkley Laboratory, Birkin's Laboratory, and the Umbrella Executive Training School. The Arkley Mountains are situated northwest of Raccoon City and are a popular hiking and camping destination frequented regularly by Raccoon's nature-loving populace as well as the tourists to the area. Most of the Arkley region is unused and is almost completely covered with heavy vegetation. The Arkley Mountains are classified as temperate hardwood forest, with the region being dominated by pine trees, maple trees, oak trees, and other native plant life such as Raccoon City's signature colored herbs. The herbs were first discovered in the Arkley region and are often used for medicinal purposes both locally and abroad. The Arkley Mountains are well known throughout the medical community, with the green, blue, and red herbs having revolutionized the healthcare industry and garnered massive profits for pharmaceutical companies, including, but not limited to, the Umbrella Corporation. Each herb has its own unique medicinal value and have no known side effects associated with their use. They can be mixed together and converted into capsule or powder form to achieve different curative effects. The herbs can be found in many areas of Raccoon City, including several of the city's key public buildings, such as Raccoon Police Station. The citizens of Raccoon City have also been known to keep the herbs in their houses and places of employment for decoration or use. The Baker family from Dulvey, Louisiana appeared to have visited the area at some point due to a picture in their house titled Arkley Mountains, July 7, 1991. After the T-virus outbreak caused by Queen Leech in the summer of 1998, the mountains and surrounding forest became considerably more dangerous for travel. Certain Umbrella experiments escaped some of the facilities located in the mountains, killing various people throughout the mountains, including out-of-state tourists, hikers, and local residents. Becoming known as the Arkley Mountain Murders to the public and the Mansion Incident to officials, the increasing attacks were unable to provide any definite leads on potential suspects, closing off the mountains and prompting RPD to deploy STARS. In addition, before these events, hikers were known to disappear into the mountains only to never be seen again, either due to being lost in the thick fog that often envelopes the forest or being lured to their deaths at the hands of one L. Lester. The Spencer Mansion was a mansion in Arkley County, United States, several miles northwest of Raccoon City within Raccoon Forest. It was designed by George Trevor of Trevor and Chamberlain fame and completed in November 1967. Although officially serving as a resort for Umbrella Corporation executives and distinguished clientele, actual guests were rare if at all existent, and the mansion was primarily used as office space for the underground Arkley Laboratory Complex, a top-secret facility used for the clandestine bioweapons research known to the Pentagon, with the mansion serving as a facade to hide the shipments of personnel and equipment in plain sight. In May 1998, the mansion was contaminated by an outbreak of T-virus, the mind-altering effects of which led to a deterioration of authority as cannibalistic murders, animal attacks, and shootings became commonplace. The facility was deemed lost in July after several attacks in the forest reached national headlines, and to cover up the research, the Umbrella-funded STARS police force was sent in to destroy the facility during a police investigation of the area, accomplishing their mission on July 25. Due to the restrictions imposed on the region by the U.S. military and the CDC, no attempts since 1998 have been made to investigate the ruins. The mansion was the brainchild of New York architect George Trevor, famous for his convention-breaking designs, such as labyrinthine floor plans and elaborate traps and locking mechanisms. When designing the mansion, he drew interior inspiration from Lord Spencer's summer home in Europe. The designs changed several times, leading to several months of delays from its original start date of March 21, 1962, with construction beginning under a new firm recommended by Spencer sometime after July 5. Further alterations were made discreetly by Spencer and not made aware to Trevor, such as access to a mine hidden behind a garden feature. Publicly, the mansion was to serve as both an American retreat for Spencer, as well as a club for distinguished colleagues in what would become Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. This was, however, a ruse to maintain the secrecy of progenitor virus, a retrovirus known only to a select few within Spencer's inner circle. Deeply paranoid, Spencer took up residence upon completion in November 1967 and invited the Trevor family to stay, at which point they were restrained, with George and Jessica Trevor dying soon after, and their daughter Lisa being kept on the premises as a test subject. Their abduction was successfully covered up, with the family's unexplained disappearance as well known as Trevor's designs. 31 years later, there was an accident in the lab, and the latest strand of the T-virus leaked, polluting the entire complex. All inhabitants, which included Umbrella researchers, were infected from the virus and were, due to the viral nature, degraded into zombies. Some who had yet to have fully succumbed to the effects of the virus were killed either by suicide, by Umbrella's security team when trying to escape the mansion, or by the BOW that had escaped their confinement. It was revealed that Queen Leech, posing as the resurrected Dr. James Marcus, was responsible for the T-virus outbreak that ravaged the mansion as an act of revenge against Oswald Spencer for having him assassinated 10 years earlier, thus beginning the events of the mansion incident. Some of the Umbrella staff members, like the Chief of Security or Albert Wesker, saw this as an opportunity to eliminate Raccoon City's law enforcement, STARS, and at the same time, gain important combat data on the BOW running loose in the mansion. There was a scheme to have STARS members lured into the mansion. It was inevitable that STARS would investigate the mansion as it was the center of the bizarre cannibalistic murders that took place in the suburbs of Raccoon City. This scheme had unfortunately proved to have had some success as much of STARS' Bravo Team division were killed by these BOW. The mansion was later destroyed when surviving STARS Bravo team member Rebecca Chambers activated the self-destruct sequence. Rebecca managed to escape the complex along with surviving STARS Alpha team members Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, and Brad Vickers via helicopter before the detonation of the estate. Albert Wesker was also reported to have survived the explosion, having become stronger using a prototype virus given to him by William Birkin. Unlike more typical mansions, the Spencer mansion did not conform to any particular set style, instead mimicking a variety of philosophies such as Regency and Second Empire. It should be noted, however, that Trevor was renowned for his unconventional designs, and the mansion itself was inspired by the existing Spencer estate. The Spencer mansion was designed in a U-shaped layout, with the south-facing entrance hall at the front and center flanked by an east and west wing, which would wrap northwards around the grounds. The entrance hall itself was 2 stories tall and served as a major thoroughfare, as typical with mansion designs. The second story level encircled the room, supported by pseudo-neoclassical columns with an east-west bridge at the center of the hallway. This hall was modified beyond Trevor's known plans, including a secret back door being a portrait and a gate under the stairs leading to the altar, something which was certainly not designed by Trevor. The West Wing consisted of a dining hall, a bar, a library, a greenhouse, a study, a bedroom, and 2 storerooms. Connecting the entrance hall with the West Wing was the dining hall itself, which was a rectangular room with the windows facing southward. A fireplace was at the west side of the room, above which the Spencer coat of arms was erected. On the north side of the room was a grandfather clock custom made to sit on a rail. If the clock was set to a certain time, it would move to reveal a secret compartment. The bar was built as an entertainment room, having previously been planned out solely for playing music. On Spencer's instructions, a piano installed in the room was modified to open up a secret compartment in the room. The greenhouse, which would peer into the compartment through a window, was where Spencer planned to grow his flowers. The position of the greenhouse is unusual in that there were no windows for natural light to enter. The library, located on the 2nd and 3rd levels, was where Spencer intended to place his scientific and other literature. Also on this floor was a study where 2 eagle statuettes were installed as a security mechanism. At the south side of the building was a large terrace which wrapped around the dining hall. This was made more expansive on Spencer's instructions so his dogs would have space to play. The East Wing consisted on the ground floor of a wider variety of smaller rooms, including 2 art galleries, the bathroom, a drawing room, a study, and a dressing room. The smaller of the art galleries, formerly a drawing room, was where Spencer placed his woman drawing water statue, while the latter used a complicated light puzzle to open up a secret entrance to the garden. Between the 2 galleries was a room Spencer used for storing scientific equipment and research samples, itself leading on to a dressing room. This scientific exhibition is not named in Trevor's designs, leaving it possible he was not aware of its intended nature. One of the more dangerous traps devised by Trevor for the mansion was in a small chamber leading to drawing room 2, where a shotgun removed from the wall in that drawing room. The shutting of doors in this room would trigger the ceiling to come down on the occupant and thus crushing them to death. The south side of the 2nd level was the East Wing terrace, which continued along the East Wing and partway around the attic, which was used for storage. This level of the East Wing was largely for guests' recreation, with many of its rooms being smaller equivalents to those elsewhere in the mansion. It included a dining room, library, and living room close to the guest rooms themselves. For recreation, there was a gallery which housed Spencer's collection of medieval suits of armor, and another for art. This art gallery took the place of previously planned billiards room, and was further modified to have moving walls as part of a booby trap, ultimately leading to a secret pit on the ground floor. This pit was not in Trevor's designs, instead being represented by a black void. It was here that there was a tombstone with Trevor's name on. The East Wing consisted on the ground floor of a wider variety of smaller rooms, including 2 art galleries, the bathroom, a drawing room, a study, and a dressing room. The smaller of the art galleries, formerly a drawing room, was where Spencer placed his woman drawing water statue, while the latter used a complicated light puzzle to open up a secret entrance to the garden. Between the 2 galleries was a room Spencer used for storing scientific equipment and research samples, itself leading on to a dressing room. This scientific exhibition is not named in Trevor's designs, leaving it possible he was not aware of its intended nature. One of the more dangerous traps devised by Trevor for the mansion was in a small chamber leading to drawing room 2, where a shotgun removed from the wall in that drawing room. The shutting of doors in this room would trigger the ceiling to come down on the occupant and thus crushing them to death. The south side of the 2nd level was the East Wing terrace, which continued along the East Wing and partway around the attic, which was used for storage. This level of the East Wing was largely for guests' recreation, with many of its rooms being smaller equivalents to those elsewhere in the mansion. It included a dining room, library, and living room close to the guest rooms themselves. For recreation, there was a gallery which housed Spencer's collection of medieval suits of armor, and another for art. This art gallery took the place of previously planned billiards room, and was further modified to have moving walls as part of a booby trap, ultimately leading to a secret pit on the ground floor. This pit was not in Trevor's designs, instead being represented by a black void. It was here that there was a tombstone with Trevor's name on. The Arkley Laboratory was the brainchild of Oswell E. Spencer, Earl Spencer, a prominent British nobleman and eugenicist who belonged to a wider circle of virologists sharing his views. The discovery of progenitor virus excited the group, who considered using it to replace the human race with a new subspecies of Übermensch, but the viral disease was found to be almost always fatal. With the Spencer Foundation lacking the funding for long-term research, 3 of the men agreed to found Umbrella Pharmaceuticals to raise capital. 3 new laboratory complexes were also constructed which could both independently engineer a less fatal progenitor strain for the eugenics project as well as developing bioweapons to be used by NATO forces in the Cold War among other buyers to gain further data. Work began on the Arkley laboratory sometime in or after 1967, using a series of limestone caverns directly under an estate built for Spencer by Trevor and Chamberlain. The mansion itself was to serve as both a facade and office space. In October 1967, architect George Trevor and his family were invited to the estate as pretext for their abduction to wipe away any knowledge of the mansion's security mechanisms. While Trevor himself was starved to death, his wife Jessica and daughter Lisa were infected with mutant strains of progenitor virus developed by Spencer. Marking the lab's first project, Jessica would herself be killed and her body discarded soon into the experiment, while Lisa's unexpected adaptation to the Type B strain led to the development of limited superhuman abilities and was thus worthy of further study. Over the next decade, the Arkley laboratory conducted a number of experiments with progenitor virus in what was quickly known as the T-virus project. This project aimed to create a progenitor strain that would be highly infectious and always fatal, which could be used by the U.S. Army in anti-insurgent operations. This project was classified with the blessing of the U.S. government in flagrant disregard of the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention in 1978. Research fell under the control of Dr. William Birkin, a child genius freshly graduated from the Umbrella Executive Training Center, who was offered the position of chief researcher after stealing a sample of Dr. James Marcus' rival T-virus prototype. Birkin's vision of the bioweapons projects ran at odds with his predecessor, and rather than focus on viral weapons with high fatality rates, he instead considered viruses that could change the host on a behavioral level and kill others. By abandoning the Ebola virus bioweapons project and splicing into alpha strain, the non-fatal cannibal disease became the most common effect instead of the fatal progenitor disease, when the research team determined 10% of people would be resistant to their new beta strain. The T-virus project was expanded with the goal of creating mutant animal species which could kill the survivors in a war zone. Early studies on T-virus effects on animals were at the time disappointing, with projects like Neptune and Web Spinner showing only size increases with comparative or lower intelligence. Birkin's team meanwhile pioneered more successful mammal bio-organic weapons, with the Cerberus project presenting a trainable attack dog. Human-animal hybrid projects were also studied with the intent on creating weapons BOW, with near-human intelligence. With methods of ex utero gestation not yet developed, the Arkley lab was supplied regularly by a large number of abducted homeless people who could be used in testing. The Chimera project, for example, required several women be impregnated with a variety of human arthropod hybrid embryos, with the DNA of the most satisfying animal preserved for future cloning. It is uncertain how the Hunter project prototypes were created, though fellow researcher Dr. Albert Wesker noted that Birkin's research often resulted in the subject's death in 1988. The Arkley team began exploring next-gen bioweaponry, developing the Tyrant project as a human supersoldier project. Studies suggested humans with certain intelligence-related genes were adaptive to the virus and could mutate into more powerful mutants, but this factor was only in 1 in every 10 million people. Without any test subjects displaying these adaptive traits, it was deemed impossible at the time to engineer a new T-virus strain that would result in a functioning Tyrant prototype. An alternate project was devised by Birkin and Wesker, which sought to implant a Nemesis alpha parasite into the body of a test subject which could be both deadly and intelligent. Lisa Trevor, still alive in custody after over 20 years, was picked as the host. Her body was seen to destroy the invasive parasite and incorporate its DNA into her own, highlighting her unusual mutations she had gone through over the years. This was soon discovered to be a progenitor strain which caused extreme mutations and cell-repairing abilities without killing the infected. Birkin retired from his role to coordinate research on the newly discovered Golgotha virus with Dr. Christine Henry in France. The G-virus project was officially started in 1991 with the opening of Nest elsewhere in the Arkley Mountains, disguised under a chemical plant. Clemens' leadership. Following Birkin's transfer, John Clemens took over as head researcher. Umbrella did not appreciate his views on their research and kept him under surveillance. At some point he began a relationship with Ada Wong, a Chinese, American agent who had infiltrated Umbrella for an unknown agency to provide research data. Personnel: this is a list of employees that were stationed in the facility at the time of viral outbreak. This information comes from various documents and reports collected by Alpha Team from the facility. Also, a number of lesser researchers was known to reside at the dormitory, a smaller structure adjacent to the mansion. They were known to have been conducting research on unusual organisms such as sharks and plants, leading to the creation of Neptune and the accidental creation of Plant 42. Staff can be separated into two categories: research and development and security. R&D itself has several divisions, two of which are known as special research and sanitation. Zombies are humans afflicted with the cannibal disease, an illness caused by the T-virus, a bioweapon originally developed by Dr. James Marcus, one of the founding members of the Umbrella Corporation. Despite having minimal organ function and a deceased-like appearance, these creatures are not reanimated corpses but living humans who have been infected and transformed by the virus mutations. The web spinner was a series of spider-based bioorganic weapons developed by Umbrella USA. Although they had functional spinning glands, despite their name, they rarely made webs with their silk. The web spinner was intended to be deployed to war zones and use its venom to injure combatants before eating them. The limited intelligence and less-than-hope strength increase made the series non-viable, and it was largely discontinued. Web spinners were a series of spider-based bioorganic weapons developed by Umbrella USA's Arkley laboratory. These BOW were created through the primary infection of spider test subjects with an early strain of the T-virus and were among the first bioweapons developed after the Arkley laboratory moved on from viral weaponry to genetically altered animals. While their increase in size was impressive, they were found unsuitable as frontline weapons on the battlefield. Their lack of intelligence made them uncontrollable and therefore a potential danger to their owners, and Umbrella was disappointed in their physical strength and had hoped for a stronger weapon. Their fast mobility and ability to climb walls was applauded, however, and they were instead re-evaluated as a secondary wave. By 1998, the web spinners were declared unfit as weapons, and many were destroyed. Several web spinners were left behind for further research and later escaped. A larger mutant named Black Tiger settled a nest in the caves beneath the courtyard of the Spencer Mansion and gained a reputation for its strength that prevented the Arkley Laboratories security team from destroying the nest. When the laboratory fell to a T-virus outbreak, the nest spiders were free to expand their territory. Baby spiders are the offspring of any spider infected with the T-virus. They would live on the back of their mothers and attack nearby foes if she was killed. Like other arthropods, little spider blood contains hemocyanin, creating a green hue, so it is possible to see a green spot on the floor after killing them by single shot or by stepping on them. Giant spider is a blanket term used for any spider that has been infected due to the T-virus in an unplanned manner, an irregular mutant. They are different from the web spinner in the sense that the web spinner BOW were experimented from the start. While the wild spiders simply mutated on contact, the giant spiders, like other T-virus infected spiders, produce little spiders, which live on their mother's back. If the back of giant spider wasn't blasted by powerful weapons, little spiders won't appear. Unlike the web spinner, these irregular mutant spiders had kept the ability to create a web for trapping prey, which logically made them much more akin to the black tiger. The giant spiders frequented in the sewers of Raccoon City, where they were infected during the Raccoon City destruction incident when the T-virus was leaked into the sewers. In a similar manner, giant spiders populated the sewers of Sheena Island 2 months later during its own viral outbreak, when T-virus-laced chemicals mixed into the sewage. The black tiger was a spider that had undergone excessive mutation, increasing its size 3 to 6 times that of normal web spinners due to prolonged infection of the T-virus. Also, unlike the ironically named web spinner, it was actually capable of producing a web. Due to the web spinner's unpredictable nature, BOW research on the specimens was suspended, and the subjects supposedly destroyed. This specimen had an unusual reaction to the virus, becoming a larger and more deadly version. With the mansion compromised by a T-virus outbreak, the spider population was no longer controlled. This allowed the black tiger to reside with its web spinner siblings in the underground caverns below the courtyard by making nest for itself and other web spinner specimens. It was killed by the STARS Alpha team during the mansion incident. The term adder refers to any of a number of viper species found around the world. of which the pit vipers can be found in North America. Although this term usually refers to the common European viper, Viper berus, a number of adders native to raccoon forest and living in and around the grounds of the Arkley laboratory were infected with the epsilon strain after eating mutant animals. Most did not exhibit major mutations apart from a more potent venom, though the yawn exhibited rapid production of growth hormones. The normal-sized adders continued to live and hunt in the trees as they had done before, dropping on warm-blooded animals. The yawn was an experimental BOW test subject created at the Arkley laboratory. It was nicknamed Yawn in reference to the way its mouth opens before attacking, which resembled a yawn. Adders would live around the Arkley Mountains, with a number residing in the trees in the Spencer Mansion's courtyard. One of these snakes was taken inside as a research specimen and infected with an unidentified strain of T-virus. The yawn grew to a considerable size and, hormonally unstable, became too aggressive to control. As the epsilon strain spread out across the laboratory personnel, they were no longer able to contain the snake, and it went on a rampage and likely killed a number of researchers while making the entire mansion its territory. The yawn would encounter stars, Bravo team members Richard Aiken and Rebecca Chambers as they explored the mansion, hunting them through individual rooms until it cornered them. Aiken saved Chambers from harm but was mauled in the process and exposed to its venom. The yawn was later fought by a member of STAR's Alpha team in the attic, but it would escape through a fireplace before it could be killed. The yawn would later attack one of the STAR's Alpha team members again in the library, where it was finally killed. The Cerberus Development Code, MA39, was an early attempt at creating a controllable bioorganic weapon by Umbrella USA, in a project led by the Arkley Laboratory. They should not be confused with zombie dogs, which encompasses all dog breeds infected with any T-virus strain in the secondary form. This creature was named after Cerberus, Kerberos in Greek, the mythological guardian of Hades, a gigantic dog with 3 heads and a collar made of venomous snakes. The Cerberus project began in the early 1980s as the beta strain was developed. It was hoped that the improved T-virus strain would create mutants more adequate for sale as military products, and Dobermans were specifically selected for the project due to their traits favoring military service. Though they suffered skin deterioration, their muscles were left largely intact, and this and their increased strength and aggression made them more dangerous. As this BOW species was created from an existing animal, unlike the Hunter program, the cost to create the Cerberus prototypes was low. Deemed a success, the later Cerberuses were created by cloning one of the prototypes. The Arkley Laboratory conducted testing on these dogs in the courtyard until the T-virus outbreak in 1998 when they escaped. Hungry and lacking their umbrella trainers, they turned feral and began killing and eating hikers out in the Arkley Mountains. Members of this pack fought with STARS, but it is unknown how many escaped the mansion incident. Chimera was a bioweapon product developed by the Umbrella Corporation, manufactured in the Arkley Laboratory sometime before May 1998. It was a human-fly hybrid, named after a monster of Greek mythology, itself a combination of different animals. Umbrella began using their newly developed T-virus strains on animals soon after their founding. However, they were met with problems with their practicality, such as a lack of intelligence or insufficient strength increases which eliminated the web spinner as a reliable weapon. In its place, the Chimera project was started, which intended to graft insect DNA into human embryos. Homeless women were abducted by Umbrella agents and forcibly impregnated with the modified embryos. Out of various insect-human hybrids that were envisioned as bioweapons, it was a fly-human hybrid that was chosen for continued study. It was subsequently cloned to produce identical bioweapons. Due to their many flaws, further research into more advanced forms was never conducted, and the Chimera's basic form was never refined to the lengths of the Hunter or the Tyrant. Several chimeras were encountered by the STARS, members during the mansion incident. In addition, Albert Weskier, shortly after regaining consciousness after the Tyrant killed him, encountered a chimera while attempting to escape, only to effortlessly kill it with a single kick due to his newfound superhuman abilities. Still, Umbrella continued at least a limited production of chimeras in other facilities for a number of years, as several were discovered during Chris and Jill's raid on their Caucasus laboratory, as well as during Weskier's own raid on the facility. Despite their shortcomings as bioweapons, the chimera have found their way onto the black market to some extent, as they were encountered in the early 2010s by the BSAA during a bioterrorist attack on a shopping mall in the United States. The Crimson Head Prototype 1 was a Crimson Head zombie that was sealed in a coffin beneath the Spencer Mansion Cemetery. What Prototype 1's name once was is a mystery. However, it is known he was an Umbrella USA employee who was exposed to the Epsilon strain during a lab accident in May 1998. As little research had been undertaken on human exposure to the strain, he was kept for further study. Soon, he was found to be too dangerous after 4 workers were killed when an attempt to feed it went wrong. Dr. John Clemens, the lab's chief, ordered Prototype 1 be placed in storage. He was placed inside a coffin in the Spencer Mansion Cemetery and became part of the facility's convoluted anti-intruder defenses, wherein to gain unauthorized access to the courtyard an intruder was to free him. Prototype 1 was finally freed on the night of July 24, 1998, by either Chris Redfield or Jill Valentine, who succeeded in killing him. The Crimson Head is one possible mutation a zombie can experience, depending on the strain of T-virus it is infected with. The V-ACT process is responsible for its crimson skin, earning it its name. Crimson Heads were the result of the unforeseen effects of the Epsilon strain on the human body. The strain, developed for the Tyrant Project, was released in the Arkley laboratory during a lab accident. As the facility staff had no experience with Crimson Heads aside from the brief, violent encounter with Crimson Head Prototype 1, they were at a disadvantage, and an informal policy became to destroy the bodies of zombies to prevent further mutation. Infected crows would appear in Raccoon City after it had become completely infected by the T-virus. These crows were noticeably more aggressive than the ones found at the Arkley laboratory, attacking anything they saw. A single crow managed to bring down Ed, a trained UBCS mercenary, able to shatter windows easily. Many were killed by flocks of them indoor and outdoors. The Hunter Alpha Development Code, MA-121, was one of the first fully functional and marketable BOW, produced by Umbrella. It was created by injecting reptilian DNA into a human embryo and administering the T-virus as a bonding agent. The MA-121 Alpha went through intensive research and development at the underground lab in Raccoon City. The Hunter project dates back to 1981, when researchers at the Arkley laboratory were developing ways to address the statistical 10% immunity rate projected if the prototype T-virus, known as the beta strain, was dispersed as a weapon larger if people had access to antiretroviral medication. The idea of using mutant animals as a means of cleaning up survivors had been tried before, but animal test subjects typically experienced a loss in intelligence, which made them impossible to control and therefore worthless as a weapon for military use. Dr. William Birkin's Hunter Project instead sought to solve this problem another way. The Hunter Project's initial prototypes were produced by infecting human embryos some 3 weeks after fertilization with the newly developed Beta II strain, Beta 2, as a bonding agent before splicing in animal genes of reptile origin. The most promising mutant, a female, was subsequently cloned to create a species of identical mutants. Growth of the Hunters took 1 year and involved repeated exposure to growth hormones. The Hunter demonstrated the intelligence equal to that of an orangutan, allowing it to recognize 10 different commands taught by trainers. The hard, keratinized skin was also found to form a tough armor. How long this prototype variety was worked on and refined is uncertain, but by 1998 Hunter Alpha clones were being shipped to other Umbrella facilities around the world, including Sheena Island's Umbrella facility. There have only been 3 known usages of Hunter Alpha in combat. Several Hunters were transported to the Umbrella Management Training Center in 1998, either to be tested or in an effort to clear out mutants. After the investigation team was attacked, these Hunters were left to their own devices, being later found at the school's anti-BOW training facility. Another group of Hunters were released from captivity in the Arkley laboratory by Dr. Albert Wesker as a means of escalating combat with STARS, police officers, so CCTV could record the fighting. Any survivors would have been killed on the morning of July 25th. Another group of Hunter Alpha brought havoc to Sheena Island along with T-103 Tyrants. These BOW were deliberately released on the command of Vincent Goldman, who planned to eliminate the entire island's population to silence a career-ruining cover-up. They were wiped out in battle with Ark Thompson, Umbrella's Undertaker unit, and finally the destruction of the island's infrastructure by explosive charges in November 1998. Neptune Development Code, FI-03, was a great white shark BOW, developed by the Umbrella Corporation as bioweaponry. They were named after the Roman god of the sea, referencing the reputation of the great white shark as the king of the seas. The Neptune project began early on in the Arkley Laboratories' research into animal bioweapons. As their test subjects, they transported several adult great white sharks and infected them with the alpha strain. The research team was disappointed with the results, with little significant change. Much of the research team moved on to other projects and most of the subjects were disposed of. A female was left for continued research when it was discovered she was pregnant. The staff monitored her carry 12 pups, but 10 died soon after hatching. The remaining 2 survived and were subject to further study into the possibility of creating self-fertilizing BOW as an alternative to cloning, but chose against cloning them. During the viral outbreak in the Arkley laboratory, the mother Neptune and her spawn were inadvertently released from their water tanks by a scientist who had suddenly gone mad and destroyed the tanks, badly flooding the entire aqua ring. These sharks were later killed when the entire aquatic lab was drained, exposing them to the air. With only minimal enhancements to their bodies, they lacked any mutation sufficient for them to survive. Lisa Trevor, 1953 to 1998, was an American superhuman and the first person to become a progenitor adapter since at least the Neolithic. Trevor was abducted as part of a retroviral research project by what would later become Umbrella Pharmaceuticals. Having survived and mutated from exposure to a progenitor strain, Lisa's enhanced abilities made her a regular and reliable test subject in bioweapons research. Her usefulness to the company ended in 1988 after 20 years of testing, when a progenitor strain dubbed Golgotha virus was isolated in her blood. Lisa's powerful regenerative abilities allowed her to survive her planned execution, and she would go on to live in the Arkley Mountains until 1998, when she involved herself in the mansion incident. She ultimately died when the facility was destroyed. Lisa Trevor was born around 1953 to architect George Trevor and his wife, Jessica. Trevor and Chamberlain was at the time a well-known construction firm which specialized in eccentric and elaborate building designs. From 1964 to 1967, the company was tasked building the elaborate Spencer Mansion in the Arkley Mountains, with Trevor herself being immortalized in its design as a wall painting in its gallery. Upon the mansion's completion, the family was invited to stay as guests of the client, Oswell E. Spencer, Earl Spencer. With George himself caught up with work and being unable to go, Jessica drove on to the mansion with Lisa, where they planned to stay the week until George arrived. Arriving at the mansion around Friday, November 10th, the two were immediately detained by Spencer's security guards and taken into an underground cavern below the estate. There, Jessica and Lisa were respectively injected with the Type A and Type B strains of progenitor virus, a newly discovered retrovirus Spencer believed would be useful for eugenics, but which required alteration to successfully mutate a human. Over the next few days, both were subjected to further testing while their mental state deteriorated, likely the onset of brain damage as an effect of the progenitor disease. While Jessica made plans for a breakout on Monday, November 13th, her poor reaction to the virus deemed her as a failed experiment, which led to her immediate execution, which prevented any hope of Lisa escaping. Unlike her mother, however, Lisa's body reacted much better to the progenitor infection, and she developed a degree of superhuman strength, though not to the extent a properly engineered progenitor strain would have accomplished. As Lisa's mental deterioration worsened and she longed for her mother, a Spencer employee was tasked to impersonate Jessica and keep her satisfied, albeit with little success. On Wednesday, November 15th, Lisa's deterioration reached a critical state in spite of her enhanced abilities, and she went into a violent outburst during dinner with the impersonator. When Lisa realized the deception, she believed the woman had stolen Jessica's face and attempted to cut it off and give it back to her mother. It is uncertain if the woman died from these lacerations. Over the next several days, Lisa's mental state worsened further, with her diary suggesting she had briefly escaped the lab following the attack. Her claims of having found the graves of both her parents cannot be reconciled with known events. However, as George was at the time still alive, she did find her mother's grave, but was unable to open as it was sealed shut by a heavy stone slab. Over the next 28 years, Lisa remained beneath the estate and was moved into the Arkley laboratory upon its completion. Her existence was kept a company secret, with none of the researchers at the facility knowing her name, and few even knowing she existed at all. Over this period, Lisa continued to deteriorate, falling into a stupor, though kept chained to her bed in the event she recovered. For much of the first 20 years she was fed through intravenous therapy and transported by wheelchair if she needed to be moved. From 1978, Dr. William Birkin, the facility's new chief researcher, made considerable use of her abilities as the need for test subjects increased. In 1988, Lisa Trevor was selected to be the host of a NE-alpha-type parasite. These parasites had been engineered by Umbrella Europe to replace the brain functions in ABOW to improve performance, but had a low success rate. During the surgical implantation, however, Lisa's immune system attacked the organism and destroyed it. Her consciousness was restored with a certain degree of intelligence after this event. When searching for an explanation, Birkin isolated a progenitor mutant strain entirely distinct from the T-virus she had previously been tested with. Over the next 7 years, Lisa Trevor became a hindrance to the research. With her mind somewhat restored, she was once more able to use her enhanced strength in her obsessive need to collect faces, making her a danger to all women in the facility, especially. Following the deaths of 3 researchers in 1995, the executives had had enough, and orders were given for the Umbrella Security Service to execute her. Owing to her regenerative abilities, the USS waited 3 days before declaring her deceased, and her body was taken away for disposal. Her disposal was handled by Birkin's successor, Dr. John Clemens, a researcher the Intelligence Division considered a potential security risk owing to his views on research ethics. Where Lisa's body was taken is uncertain, but her regenerative abilities allowed her to recover, and she made her life in the Arcleis as a mountain woman, surviving on her own means. Following the T-virus outbreak at the Arcley laboratory in May 1998, Lisa Trevor's territory expanded or moved to encompass the estate and land to the east, making a home out of a cabin the staff used to store pumpkins and other vegetables grown nearby. Based on the findings of the Raccoon Police Department's Special Tactics and Rescue Service, who stayed at the facility from Thursday 23 Saturday, July 25. Lisa had made use of the underground tunnels where she was first infected accessed from a trapdoor in the shed. In one room were a number of objects she had stolen from the mansion. Lisa Trevor made repeated threats on stars, and on their final confrontation jumped into a chasm, after finally being able to recover her mother's corpse buried inside the stone coffin. On the Saturday morning, Lisa Trevor had made her way out of the chasm just as the facility's self-destruct system was activated. Exploring the lab regardless of the situation, she encountered Dr. Albert Wesker, recognizing him as one of her torturers, who had since become a STARS captain. Wesker by this point had also become a superhuman thanks to exposure to a T-virus strain with more typical progenitor properties, and was able to escape her. Following him into the mansion, Lisa continued to harass him, eating up more and more time. During her fight with Wesker in the entrance hall, she was pinned down by a falling chandelier, allowing Wesker to escape as the mansion exploded. The monster plant is found in a fountain in the Spencer Mansion's greenhouse. It was infected by T-virus contaminated water, transforming its vines into mobile appendages that prevent intruders from proceeding further into the room. Chris comes across the mutant plant in an attempt to reach the armor key, but the plant hinders him from reaching it. So Chris inserts herbicide into the water pump. The chemical contaminated water kills the plant and Chris is able to reach the armor key and herbs behind the mutated plant's withered vines. Plant 42 was a large plant infused with the T-virus and was originally part of an experiment on botanic subjects by Umbrella researcher Dr. Henry Sarton. The name location that the plant was growing on was point 42 of the dormitory. Plant 42 would literally mean plant at point 42. Plant 42 was created by Henry Sarton, who injected a plant living in point 42 with the T-virus out of curiosity. Plant 42 proved to be completely unique, incomparable to any other plant-based test subjects. Its roots buried deep through the wood and concrete in the residence and began feeding on the chemical-rich water of the aqua ring, likely promoting further growth. Expanding its vines across the building, it used cracks in the flooring to attack passing staff members, feeding on their blood. By May 21st, Plant 42 had completely taken over a room of the dormitory. Able to manipulate doorknobs and move its vines, Plant 42 captured and drained several researchers of their blood when they tried to destroy it. It was discovered by Sarton's team that Plant 42 was sensitive to a chemical known as UMB20, otherwise known as V-Jolt. A plan was devised to destroy it, involving feeding it directly to the roots. However, this plan could not be accomplished, either due to the continued deterioration of the researcher's health from T-virus infection or because of the escaped Neptunes in the flooded aqua tank chamber. Plant 42 was finally destroyed on the night of July 24 when STARS searched the dormitory building. TICs were bioorganic weapons developed by the Umbrella Corporation. TICs were developed at the Arkley Laboratory in the 1990s and appear to have been an arthropod-based offshoot of the Hunter project. TICs were designed as bipedal bioorganic weapons in a similar style to the Hunter Alpha line. Aside from its brown skin and antennae, the primary difference between TICs and Hunters is the possession of sickle-like arms, which were designed for cutting people to pieces in the dark. Wasps of various species were infected with T-virus strains. Wasps around Arkley County were infected with these viruses in a number of manners. Mutant wasps were created in May 1998 after feeding on the pollen of Plant 42. Due to the accidental outbreak at the Arkley Laboratory, the staff were unable to control a mutant wasp nest, with at least one man succumbing to the poison. A wasp nest at a nearby abandoned hospital was also contaminated by suckling on the nectar of the monster plant, Dorothy. In Raccoon City, wasp nests were infected by unknown means. One nest was based within Raccoon University's ventilation tower and was marked by Dr. Peter Jenkins as a source for V-poison, a critical ingredient in creating daylight. This tyrant code, named T002, was part of the Arkley Laboratory's quest to develop the ultimate life form. The T002 and its associated Tyrant project was, at the time, top secret. T002 was found to have intelligence almost at the same level as its human pre-infected form, which would have allowed it to follow a wide variety of commands beyond that of the Hunter models had its life not been drastically cut short. The T002 was the first successful development of the Tyrant project, an Umbrella USA R&D project that sought to create enhanced human bioweapons intelligent and strong enough to fully replace soldiers on the front lines. The project was stalled for years due to the rarity of a certain gene for intelligence, which allowed infected humans to mutate differently from zombies. Such individuals were, themselves, likely to die during the mutation, rendering Tyrant impractical to create at the time. During the 1990s, the Tyrant project staff carried out research on an improved strain, dubbed Epsilon, and were able to advance the project to the next stage. Several convicts with beneficial genetic traits were located by Umbrella and brought over to the lab to take part in the project. Due to the severity of the mutations, most of the participants perished. Upon completion, T002 was planned to be set up against combat veterans in a live-fire exercise before clones were to be mass-produced. Development of T002, however, was never formally concluded. During a procedure in May 1998, the interference of Queen Leech allowed T002 an opportunity to release Epsilon as an airborne pathogen, infecting a number of researchers. Consequently, no written report was completed, and the BOW itself received no new bodily improvements following the addition of its altered cardiovascular system. Cloned embryos of T002 were successfully evacuated by Dr. Albert Wesker during a visit, but the Tyrant itself was not evacuated when the quarantine was raised. In July, Wesker was given orders to destroy him during his STARS team's investigation of the above mansion, but instead released it from containment with the knowledge it could attack him. After stabbing Wesker, he turned its attention to the other STARS survivors. Though he was knocked out soon after, his power limiter was disabled, allowing him to begin mutating into a super tyrant. He forced his way through the concrete of the Arkley Laboratory to catch up with STARS, and fought them once more on the helipad, where he was finally killed after suffering a direct hit from a rocket launcher. Jill Valentine, an intelligent soldier that has rescued many STARS members from danger in the past. Jill has been reassigned to Raccoon City just like Chris. She is excellent with special mechanical devices such as lockpicks. Chris Redfield, after being kicked out of the Air Force, Chris became a drifter until he met Barry Burton. Barry recruited him for the newly formed STARS. Now Chris has been reassigned to a smaller unit at Raccoon City headquarters, STARS Alpha Team. Barry Burton, Chris Redfield's old friend and partner. Former SWAT team member, Barry maintains and supplies weapons for all STARS members. He has over 16 years of experience and has led many successful projects. Albert Wesker has risen quickly inside the STARS. organization and currently leads the Alpha team. Viewed by many as a cool guy, from his snappy haircut to his perpetual shades, Wesker was recruited by a headhunter for his sharp insight and eventually founded the STARS unit in Raccoon City. Joseph Frost, previous member of STARS, Bravo team, and already stationed in Raccoon City, Joseph was recently promoted to serve as vehicle specialist for Alpha team. Brad Vickers. Brad is a computer expert and is an excellent information gatherer. Unfortunately, his fear of dying and lack of enthusiasm for rushing into danger have earned him the nickname Chicken Heart. Enrico Marini, Bravo team's leader, and Wesker's second in command for the STARS unit. Enrico feels threatened by the arrival of the Alpha team, thinking that Chris or Barry may end up replacing him as number one to Wesker. Forrest Spire. Forrest is a great sniper in addition to his duties as Bravo's vehicle specialist. He is a consummate professional, and his work earns him great respect from his other members. Kenneth J. Sullivan, a quiet but very talented field scouting officer. Kenneth formerly worked as a chemist. He wonders why his chemical experience is necessary in Raccoon City but quickly discounts this since Wesker himself enlisted him in STARS. Rebecca Chambers, the youngest member of the group. Rebecca has been recruited for her knowledge of field medicine and first aid. She is nervous around other members, both because of her age and her lack of experience. Chris comes across Rebecca during the escape, and she proves to be quite useful. Since Chris isn't very practical, Rebecca comes along to help him at certain points during the escape, such as playing the piano in the bar and creating the V-jolt. Richard Aiken, a very important member of STARS, serving as Bravo's communications expert. The only link back to headquarters for teams out in the field, Richard actually has to pull double duty as radioman for both units since Alpha Team really has no trained operator.